Right. My name's Angela Spencer. I'm Sheila's daughter, and I am giving a PowerPoint presentation or a speech accompanied by a presentation of, I'm giving a version of a speech that Sheila did, and it's also an abridged version. I cut out some of it. If you want the original, it is on her website. And in this speech, she basically goes over what the white settlers were doing in Natal up to around 1860. She looks at various groups. Okay. Just the PowerPoint is available on the website, sheilaspencer.com, has the index. Um, if I am talking as myself, not Sheila, I will flag it in the text. I do make some notes. Here is an introduction to her work. She's been working on this material since the 1960s. She covers the settlers between 1824 and 1857. It was published by the University of Natal Press, and she got an honorary PhD from UKZN in 2010 for her work. There's a list of all the things she consulted to work out the sources. Those are all the people who helped her. That is a map from the original book. The map was generated by the University of Natal's, as it was then, cartology, map department, showing Natal as it was at that time. And as you can see, it does not look like KZN today. That is because there was Zululand, Zulu country, as you can see, was owned by the Zulus, and there wasn't much crossing of this river that defined the two territories. The first group that she talks about are the first to arrive, the hunter traders, 26 hunter traders who arrive in 1824 and establish themselves around the bay and Port Natal. Conditions were rough and none of them leave. Sounds like the first boat that comes past, they jump on. 2 months later, before the end of the year, 11 had left. Only 6 remained, and amongst them, Henry Francis Finn, and Henry Ogle lived to see Natal as a British colony. And this is a picture of the first Finn chief, Henry Francis Finn, taken from Sharon Bramdio's, I think it's her master's thesis. I'm not sure. It might be her PhD. That's where I got the picture. And if you lived in Durban in the past, where at the time when Durban still had phone books, you would see that a substantial section of the phone book was devoted to, well, a large, more than a few pages, devoted to the Finns and the Ogles and the Duns, given the fact that these men took Zulu wives. Um, Early Cape settlers, some of these moved up to Natal, drifted up before its annexation in 1843, mostly from the Eastern Cape. One example is Alexander Bigger and 2 of his sons, Dick King and Cato. I think that's George Cato. And then, as I mentioned, the Duns. So Robert Newton Dunn was the father of John Dunn, who was a Zulu chief. And there's a picture of him. Edward Morwood arrived, first person to start growing sugar here and in KZN, and John van der Planck, who started wattle cultivation. There were also American missionaries in Natal at this time. And when I say Natal, I'm not denying the fact that social change has happened. It was called Natal then. It is historically correct to call it Natal at that time. So the first missionary she talks about is Dr. Newton Adams, and Adams College at Amanzimtoti is named after him. There was also Daniel Lindley, who was the pastor to the Voortrekkers after they arrived in Maritzburg. There's a picture of him. He and his wife Lucy found the Ananda Seminary School, and if I'm correct, that is where Nelson Mandela voted in 1994. He chose to go there to cast his vote because of its, since, okay, now I'm speaking as Angela, The ANC has this, well, the liberation movements have often have these strong ties to the missionary schools. The liberation movements were often made up not of the working class, but of the educated elite, especially in early ANC history. So those missionary schools played a big role in that. Okay, back to Sheila. Alden Grout, who gave his name to Groutful. These were the three original missionaries, and they came from the American Board of Commissioners for Foreign Ministers, and they remain in Natal after it becomes a British colony. Then there were the Voortrekkers. They came over the Drakensberg at the end of 1837, and after defeating Dingaan at Blood River in 38, began to settle in the territory they had conquered. When, in turn, the British defeated them in 1842 and ended the Republic, many trekked back over the mountains. By the end of 1843, the year of British annexation, only about 365 trekker families remained, while in 1847, according to the Grahamstown Journal, there were only approximately 60 Boer families left in Natal. Later, some did become reconciled to British rule and returned. And that is an aerial image of the monument at Blood River. The two Englishmen are known to have definitely come with the Voortrekkers, namely William Cowie and Samuel Liversidge. Cowie had Cowie's Hill named after him, and he trekked with the family of his wife, Magdalena Josina Laas. The Laases were given the farm Salt River Poort, on which Pinetown was later laid out. And this is the Cowie's Hill signage on the Comrades route. Cowie was appointed a field cornet by the Boers in 1838 and was one of their Heemraden in 1839. But then, at the time that the fort was besieged, he assisted the British as much as he could, and for his pains ended up as a fugitive from the Boers. Liversidge was an 1820 settler and a leader of a party of Staffordshire settlers who emigrated to the Cape on the John. He and his family settled at the farm Broughton on the Umgeni at Albert Falls, and later moved to the area between York and Rietvlei. Liversidge's children married into the Voortrekker family, like the Martins, the Aces, the Van Niekerks, the Van Jaarsvelds, and the Mullers. And that is a sign at the old fort in Durban. More Cape settlers. Once Natal became a British possession, a considerable number of Cape Colony residents moved here. Among these were David Dale Buchanan, the founder of the Natal Witness, which still exists today, and its controversial editor for many years. It exists as the Witness. John Bird, distinguished civil servant and compiler of the Annals of Natal, Donald Moody, the colony's first secretary to government, and Walter Harding, who became Natal's first Chief Justice. Theophilus Shepstone, like Bird, Moody, and Harding, was transferred from the Cape Civil Service to that of Natal. And there is Jeff Guy and the cover of one of his books about Theophilus Shepstone and the forging of Natal. Among the 1820 settlers who made their homes in Natal were John Bailey, the founder of East London, and Charles Kestell as well. Kestell's son, John Daniel Kestell, had the Free State town named after him. Buntingville residents moved to Natal. Remember that there were 10 wars between the settlers, first the Boer settlers and then the English settlers and the Xhosa. And so in 1846, one of those wars, the War of the Axe, was raging on the Cape frontier, and a number of families from the Butterworth area had to flee northward to the Buntingville mission station. From there in 1847, and under the leadership of James Calverley, they made their way overland to Natal in what could be termed as a minor trek. Examples of those surnames would be Whitehead, Mitchley, and Flukes, which is now pronounced Fluk. The next infusion of white blood was the arrival of the German settlers, 188 in number, brought out by Jonas Bergtahl, a Cape merchant who wanted them to grow cotton. He had originally tried to get settlers from England and Scotland and later from Bavaria, where he came from, but without success. Got this picture from the Dyser collections at UKZN. And I think there is a Bergtahl museum in Westville. The immigrants finally collected were from the areas around Osnabrück and Bremen, and they landed in March 1848 on the Beta. They were settled on property inland from Durban in what became known as New Germany and Westville, which was named after the then Lieutenant Governor, Martin West. Cotton didn't work out, so they became mainly market gardeners. Some made their way to New Hanover, Greytown, and Maritzburg. Cato Ridge is another area where many of those settler names can be found. Examples of those names: Ollerman, Turler, Winter, Torlager, Dinkelman, Erfman, Boss, Kerner, Kraber, Schwegman, Westermeyer, Schaffer, Schafferman, Lang, Klusner, Lartz, Nipper, Sixmeyer, and Fraser. And this is Google Maps showing New Germany as it is today. This is the highway coming into Durban, and here is Westville. Here, there's what was known as UDW, but it's now UKZN Westville campus. Mauritius was a source of a trickle of immigrants after 1843, and this flow increased in 1850 when about 50 Mauritians arrived with the intention of growing sugar on the coast. In 1854 arrival from Mauritius, James Reno Saunders was the founder of the Saunders family, which was significant in the sugar industry, the Saunders family of Tongaat. I got this picture from the 1860 Heritage Centre website. The 1860 Heritage Centre is in Durban, and it commemorates the history of the Indian families who arrived as indentured laborers starting in 1860. And just to step out of, to speak as Angela, we have to note that the sugar industry had a dirty history, an ugly history. In Natal, the laborers were not treated well by the white farmers. And there's more reading on this at the links which you can find in the PowerPoint if you want to investigate further. Discharged soldiers were another group of the white population that made themselves useful. Most were from the 45th Regiment, which served in Natal from 1843 until 1859, and that was the longest period in the colony by any of the British regiments. They excavated 45th Cutting and also built Fort Nottingham. 45th Cutting is a road going out of Durban inland, going out through Sydenham, I think. Most of these men either earned their discharges or bought them or were pensioned while in the colony. Some whose time was not up when the regiment left Natal made their way back from England when they were discharged, so they must have liked it here. Anyway, this is the side outside the Fort Nottingham Museum, which is well worth a visit. It's inland from Nottingham Road if you come off the highway. It's a lovely museum and it's a beautiful part of the world. And there's a lovely restaurant there too. How the fates align. So this is a photo from the KZN, a photographic historical record by Hugh Bland, and the photo is of 45th Cutting. And I'm thinking that we're looking with the sea behind us and we're looking inland. And that is the Fort Nottingham Museum.